A teacher affects eternity. We can never tell where his influence stops. Je ne trahirai aucun secret en vous révélant qu'avant de diriger le labo de perception auditive computationnelle de Johns Hopkins, Mounia a été la meilleure élève doctorante de M. Shamma. Donc, Shihab Shamma est quant à lui professeur à l'École normale supérieure de Paris, au DEC, le département d'études cognitives, et à l'Université du Maryland. Ses recherches portent sur la façon dont le cerveau traite la parole, la musique, ainsi que les autres sons complexes, mais aussi sur la façon dont ces signaux peuvent influencer nos émotions. Mais ce n'est pas tout. Professeur Shamma est avant tout un père d'élèves, le père d'un alumni de l'école, William, qui étudie actuellement à Columbia. De plus, depuis plus de 10 ans, Professeur Shamma anime un atelier à l'école afin de faire découvrir les neurosciences aux élèves. Maintenant, je vais trahir un secret. En plus de tout cela, M. Shamma est un incroyable cuisinier. The best Thanksgiving dinner ever I had in my life. On behalf of the entire school, Shihab, I really would like to thank you for your incredible kindness and for everything you do to our students. Thank you.
I think Laura appreciates that. For me, one of the happiest moments of my day or my month or my year is when I walk down the street in Paris and I get stopped by young people and say, "Oh, I took your workshop and I had a really great time." And I say, "What are you doing now?" And he says, "I'm studying neuroscience in this place or that place." And it's so exciting. I can't tell you. So if this happens to you, please let me know. Don't hesitate. So after you heard Munya talk about attention, I'm going to tell you about how we use attention to study how you react to music. And then afterwards, music makes you dance. You can't help it. You'll be listening to music and you'll be dancing in your seat. And then Idan will tell us about the creativity. So that makes it all possible to invent music and invent dance. So music is everywhere in all human cultures. And it's been around. There are instruments that we find that are more than 40,000 years old. We were monkeys, and we still played music. And as you'll see, animals, of course, sing a lot and all that, but we do music for not very clear reasons. Some people think that we do music because it makes the musician very attractive so they can have more children, and that's how we ended up having music. Other people think that this is serious theories, by the way. I'm talking science here, right? Other people think that when you dance together on a stage and you have two people dancing, they begin to bond. And in fact, if you have an entire village doing a depka or doing some kind of a dance, it creates a strong bond between the people in the village or the tribe. So there are real reasons why perhaps music is important for us. It's maybe evolution produced it. Some people think, no, we're just very smart and we started playing music. You don't need to have it be essential for our development. This is sort of like saying we all talk, but we didn't talk so that we can make poetry, although poets may disagree. But of course, wherever the reason is, we are very interested in knowing if music actually even affects your brain and makes the musician much smarter than others. I'm sure a lot of the parents here are really for that reason. They want to know whether they should have these poor teenage kids do all these practices every day and all that stuff. So don't hate me for that. I mean, I'm talking to the students now. But it does, unfortunately, really does affect your brain and does change a lot about how you think and how you view the world and how you perceive. So the obvious thing about music is that music has melody and you can tell the different sounds of different instruments. But music has many deep levels that we can study and that I will try to just give you a hint of how we go about it. For example, you come from a culture, like you're French and you're listening on France Musique or whatever station you listen to, and you're constantly acquiring musical culture. Whether you're listening or not, whether you like it or not, in fact, you're absorbing it all. And that shapes you as a French listener. And so that's what we call exposure, enculturation. It's exactly the same as the way your child, your baby, even in the first days of life, they can recognize their own mother tongue from any other language or speech. That's because they listen, not because they understand what you're saying, but they can tell the sounds of the language of the mother and the house where they are, and they absorb that by exposure and become culture. They can imagine it. So we study imagining sound, and I'll tell you a little bit more. And of course, become more sophisticated and more difficult to study how you react to music. You're listening to music, you don't just sit passively there. You're listening and you're increasing and decreasing the amount of tension or attention that you do. And finally, of course, some people cry when they listen to certain music because music brings memories and even for no obvious reason, no memories at all. You listen to a piece of Bach and you start tearing. And some people, of course, listen to a million different kinds of music, all evoke these strong emotions. And so how does that happen in the brain? Now, because of these emotions, because of these reactions and all that, so people have noticed that if you have Parkinson's and you listen to music, your tremors decrease, you begin to actually behave more normally without even knowing why. And we don't know why. As scientists, we have no idea. Unfortunately, people who have loved ones who have Parkinson's and other diseases like that, they think we really know why. And National Institutes of Health, for example, in the United States just announced a big program in sound and health because we have no clue. And we need to get more people interested in these topics. And that guy over there on the guitar is the director of the National Institutes of Health. He's really super important. He directs billions of dollars every year to do research and he thinks it's really important. And as you can see from titles nowadays, there are thousands of titles every month on studies done on the effect of music on development and speaking and so on. So now, when you look in the brain, when you're listening to music, you begin to discover that in fact music does have some special, it's a special signal for the brain. There are some very small regions in the brain of humans that light up, only respond when there's music, but not for other sounds. And there are others that respond only for speech. So music is as important as speech. And by the way, when I say music and the listener responding to music, all of you are musicians. It's not about somebody practicing and playing instruments and all that stuff. It's really about all of us react to music, whether it's pop or classical. So that's what I mean by music is as important as language for the brain, because all of us speak also. And so we use these kinds of special responses and all that to probe into the brain to try to figure out what happens when I expose you to music, special kind of music. But it's really difficult to do that without doing some special games. So for example, we bring in some French students And they have been listening to Western music all the time. And we know that because we know how they appreciate the music. We can measure that. But what we wanted to know is how quickly do they acquire music they get exposed to. So we, for example, have this website where it plays only Chinese music. And to get permission to get into this website, we give you a password. And only then, when you log in, we know exactly how long you're listening to that Chinese music. So when we get the kids who have never listened to Chinese music before, and we measure after they listen to music, after only 4 hours of listening to Chinese music, their brain responses change from blue to red. And almost every single person we've tested so far expresses or shows exactly these kinds of effects. Something in your brain changes permanently when you learn a new thing. And learning another culture, music, or even maybe if you can do that, it's a bit difficult to do this for new French music, but all of these have permanent effects on your brain. When you imagine music, just like when you imagine speech, it feels like you have music in your head. And we are lucky to have some really talented people we can ask to imagine music for us. And some of these imaginations involve, as you'll hear from Vered afterwards, dance and movement. And so, for example, one of the famous instruments, the theremin, it's a Russian instrument that was built at the beginning of the century, last century, and it involves playing, not by the usual thing, but you create a magnetic field and then you move. It's almost like you dance. And by this dance, you create this gorgeous music. There are very few people who are superb at this, play this instrument. This is one of them, Grégoire Blanc. There he is there. You see he's moving his hands and all that. And just like this performer here. So, and it's incredible when you see somebody do this. He's able to imagine this music. He's able to imagine this music precisely. And it helps that he has this physical ability. There he is. He's a good friend of a student that works with me, PhD student, Guillaume Marion. And so he invited him. We put the cap on his head, and we record the electrical signals in his head, and ask him to imagine the music. And, oh my God. Now you'll imagine it all night. And this is the kind of signal that you see, and we can compare the signals that come out of his head while there's no music, there's nothing, he's only imagining it. And we can compare it to actually music played into his ear. And you see there is remarkable correspondence. We can in fact even have him play music. He's a great, he does audiation, it's called. He can imagine Bach chorales and all that. And we can guess, read his mind, and tell which Bach chorale he's playing by imagining it. As you can imagine, the CIA is very interested in this. So it's possible. Maybe it will be you who will do it for real and have somebody walk around in a cap and know exactly what you're thinking. You may ask, why on earth are you doing this and you're being paid to do this? This is the luckiest thing you can do as a scientist, is that you get paid to do something that you really love to do anyway. In fact, you would pay to do it. But one of the reasons is an example. You know, I didn't check the time. I'm okay? Okay, I just have like 3 more slides. This slide is about a student who was here at EJN. This student, a very clever student, And he was a great pianist. That's not his picture, by the way. So I wouldn't dare to do that. He discovered that sometimes he just zones out in the class. He's sitting there. That I should be careful what I say, just in case you start thinking, oh my God, I zone out all the time. Okay, he had more severe zoning out kind of episodes. And he had basically epilepsy, but very certain kind of epilepsy. So we had him be diagnosed and operated on by a very big surgeon in California at the University of California, San Francisco. Because this kid was so interested in neuroscience and these ideas of the brain and music and all that, he said, I want to do experiments on myself. So what they do is they open up his brain, they put wires into his head, inside his head, and that's the way you treat people which have these conditions, because you want to wait around for a few days until they have another seizure, and then you know where the seizure began and ended and all that, and you can operate. Well, this kid said, I play music, let's do this experiment. And he actually designed and helped design this experiment. And the experiment was he played piano with his wires in his head and everything. And then the wires, that's the brain, and the wires are where these red dots are, so we could cover a lot of his brain. And then he played Bach, piece that he knew very well. He played it, and he can hear the music, and we see the activity in his brain. But the cool part was that when you turn off the piano and you ask him to play again, it was like imagining the music. There was the same activity in his brain. So his brain was activated by this imagination. We had wires into his brain, not like this. Grégoire would not agree to us do that to him, but this kid had the wires inside his head. So we can have really accurate picture of what was going on in his brain. And you see that the activation in his brain, while the sound was playing and when the sound was not playing at all, were very similar. And there was a detailed study that appeared in one of the biggest journals on this topic. So this is really important because it tells us a lot about how we learn, this only happens because he knew how to play that piece really well. If you ask a pianist how they practice, they can sit at a dinner table and move their fingers, and that's part of their practice. And the reason for that is because in their head the music is playing, and that's just as good as practicing. Well, don't tell your parents that, but if you're really good, yes. Okay, one last thing. When we listen to music on a moment-by-moment basis, we react. We increase the tension, we relax, So how do we know that? Well, we can bring people and ask them to use a slider like you have at the bottom there, and they can tell us, do they feel tension? Do they not feel tension? Do they feel It's easy to do that, as you can imagine, if you're watching a Hitchcock movie and there's somebody bringing a gun next to the head of this, the tension is pretty high, and you increase. But in music, you can do that, and it's remarkable that how accurate these measurements. So we call these behavioral measurements. But we also relied on fantastic classical critics, music critics, that can look at the music and say, yes, of course, the composer designed exactly this music to raise the tension here, to make you relax here, and they can do that. And it's remarkable, the match between those two, between the music critics and the measurements that you do on people. Well, when you put measurements on the head, we wanted to know if we can just grab anybody, not a music critic, not somebody, put these wires over their heads. Can we predict exactly how they are feeling on a moment-by-moment basis? So this is the relation to attention. It turns out that when you listen to music and we record your electrical signals, the EEG in your head, we can compare the two directly. And the comparison is really good, the match is really good when you're feeling tension and you're paying attention. and it decreases when you relax. So we can track, based on this neural signal, the comparison, the moments where there is a lot of interesting tension and relaxation, tension, relaxation. And we can only guess. How do we know this is true? Well, we can ask you to do these measurements on the slider on a different day, and then bring you and record you in your head and get this other curve and compare the two. So I'm going to show you just 2 examples of measurements, and then I'm done. This is nice music. So this is Beethoven Fifth. Everybody's here. Probably sliders and curves will show very similar results, which is that when you start listening to the music, the black curve is the neural matches, the neural measurement in your head. And the red is what a slider would tell you. And in the first few seconds, the match is bad. Your brain hasn't figured out exactly where things are. And so it takes about 60 seconds or so. So somebody like Beethoven, I know you want me to shut up and just listen, but somebody like Beethoven would know the first 60 seconds is a waste of time. It's to grab your attention. And then you start playing. And I'm going to move it a bit faster because otherwise Log will kick me out of here. So now look at the match between the neural and the behavioral. This subject was not asked to do anything, just sit and enjoy the music. That's it. Well. And you see, now we can track your enjoyment of the music. And a music critic would agree exactly with these kinds of measurements. So we can use basically neuroscience to tell you if this music is worth it for you or not. And if you don't react with tension release, then you're wasting your time. So when I told my wife this, I said, but what about this jazz piece of music? And she assured me that nobody would listen to this. So this piece takes a long time to build up. Huh? It's not playing. Okay, it's playing. As you can see, it really takes, but it takes 60 seconds actually to build up. 60 seconds at the bottom. But if you keep going, this is not Beethoven Fifth. This is not Bach. You can't even hum this on a melody. But the tension release curves are very similar. It's amazing. So it just tells you that your neuroscience controls you. Whether you like it or not, you're reacting deep inside with the same kind of patterns. So I'm done. I just want to say that, again, I really, I'm so grateful for EJM for making me have so many more children than I can possibly take care of at home. So, and they keep getting younger every year. I don't know why. But now we can hear about what makes you move, whether you like it or not, when you listen to music there and Lord.